for the rest of this weekend.
Could be. I mean, a lot of it is going to be on how well these teams sort of metagame their way through the bracket and their expectations as to what dungeons they really need to drill it down and focus the most upon. So Theater of Pain is going to be starting us off with a fortified bolstering nasty affix combination to get us going. But both these teams facing elimination as we get ourselves started with game number 1. It's Perplexed and Complexity.
Yeah, and Complexity, already having played a Theater of Pain yesterday against Echo, unfortunately they had a full team wipe on one of those platform pulls, and they lost to Echo. So hopefully they don't make that same mistake again. Actually, they completely changed their comp, interestingly enough. Yesterday they were playing Rescue Druid, and now they switched to that Holy Paladin, so completely changing up their comp, which probably also means that they changed up their strategy. Very interesting, but they are sticking to the Vengeance Demon Hunter. They do think the Vengeance is better here, which is very interesting because almost every other team is playing the Prod Warrior for Theater of Pain because of that Spell Reflect that is so useful for many bosses, and also just Prod Warriors being so tanky against physical damage that is just so useful in this dungeon.
Yeah, I think that both the Prot Warrior and the Vengeance Demon Hunter are fairly reliable picks. But right here, right off the bat, Perplexed, you have Swag doing 50k DPS the whole entire time, and the first boss is already dead off the side of Perplexed, where Complexity are still at 20% HP. Holy smokes, that was a fast first pull.
Yeah, and keep in mind, of course, Perplexed running that full physical comp, that means that Swag is gonna have that extra shout from the warrior, so getting a little bit of extra damage in by that buff, while Complexity is running a mixed comp. They have magic damage buff for the mage, but both the Windwalker and the Rogue, they have the physical damage buff, so it's like a mixed comp, while Perplexed is running that full physical comp. So a very interesting choice by Complexity. It does give them that mage, and we know how good mage can be, that Frost Mage. It's almost in every single MDI comp, so I hope that's going to be worth it for them to make to basically lose out on some damage.
That hunt. This dungeon, Theater of Pain specifically, is MM Hunter's best dungeon by like a decent bit. And so it does also make sense that Wolf Disco is playing that Marksmanship Hunter. So right now, Perplexed taking a little bit of an early lead. They're grabbing Executioner of Varuth plus some of these Shackled Souls. And Perplexed able to down that first mini-boss. Complexity on the right side of your screen, getting their pull underway. Also, just a little bit behind, somewhere in the range of 15 seconds behind here. And so now Perplexed using their Shroud, they're going to be making their way towards Incinerator plus this Portal Guardian. This is very dangerous for bolstering, and so immediately Perplexed is grabbing some of these Shackled Souls. They need to make sure that this Portal Guardian dies, probably the first mob that you would like to die in this pack, because if these Shackled Souls do bolster up this Portal Guardian and to cast that Soul Storm, you're probably going to wipe.
Yeah, definitely has to be careful with bolstering. That's also a reason why Complexity has wiped in their run against Echo, where they just didn't manage the bolstering properly and they had some cast going through. So hopefully not happening again. As Perplexed now is finishing off that Tormentor, Arcoleth, they're going to be getting that Anima power. And because they already killed Varuth, that means that both of the teams are going to have both of those offensive Anima powers already. And the other two, they're probably not going to be dealing with. So they're going to be skipping both Oroth and also Sogodon. So they're going to have to deal with those two debuffs on the last boss. All
right, so immediately Perplex is going to these double Bone Mages. But they only have one Purge for that shield that Bone Mage has. That Hunter does have... I think it's called Trank Shot. I don't know what it's actually called, this expansion. I think it's Trank Shot. So they can remove one magic effect from the Bone Mage. The second Bone Mage just has to be DPS down manually, since they don't have purges like an AoE spell steal or something like that, where Complexity able to get those Bone Mages purged instantly, and they make up a pretty decent amount of time just having that access to that spell steal. So that was somewhere in the range of probably like 10 seconds that Complexity knocked off right there.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that the other mage was bolstered because they killed the one much quicker, so they also had to deal with that bolstering. So definitely a big time save for Complexity here. As Perplexed, though, they have gathered up this pool so quickly, and look how cleanly they dealt with this bolstering pool here. They killed everything basically in the same second. That was really well done. Let's see if Complexity can execute it so cleanly as well on their side. Looks like they did bolster one of the Soulbinders, and that's actually really dangerous because the Soulbinder leaves a dot behind. You can see just how low I'm Fired Up and Shakib were dropping there because of that debuff. Did manage to survive, and it looks like Complexity is not dealing with that extra trash pack that Perplexed is dealing with. So that means Complexity is going to have to make up that trash later on, eventually.
I think that they may be able to make up some of this trash here on these Bone Mages. It depends on how many Perplexed and Complexity would like to pull here. Complexity definitely in a better position to be able to use that spell steal, utilize that mage to be able to get all of those shields off instantly, as you do see that spell steal animation being cast on all of these mages. And now this Bone Reaver, it was getting cleaved down a little bit while some of those Bone Mages were in CC, and now everything is being killed off perfectly by Complexity. We're on the left side of your screen. Perplexed, just a little bit slow to set up their pull. They are grabbing all of the Bone Mages in. Ooh, that Ring of Peace. This is really bad for Perplexed.
It looked like they needed to use the Ring of Peace as like a last resort kind of interrupt because the Bone Spears were about to get casted. But of course, Ring of Peace, one of the worst CCs to use because they are just being spread apart, especially during bolstering.
Yep.
Did manage to finish it off anyway, but yeah, it cost them a few seconds because of that. Now Complexity dealing with that last trash pack before the boss. They are holding on to that Ashen Hollow. Both Perplexed and Complexity's Holy Paladins are just holding on for quite a while now. I think it came back up like almost 2 minutes ago at this point. So holding it for the boss or for that Gore Chop pull after the boss. We'll see how long they're holding it here. But Perplexed definitely on Complexity's heels. And again, keep in mind that Perplexed did one extra trash pull, a smaller one.
Exactly. I think that the big thing for Complexity here, and one of the main differences in their comp that we were talking about, is just that Frost Mage. That allowed Complexity to make up a lot of time. Now, Perplexed, on the left side of the screen, they have killed off all of their trash. Like you said, 3% enemy forces count ahead, where Complexity are already at 25% HP down on Kultharok. At this point, which side would you like to be on? Do you think that Complexity has the advantage here, or do you think that Perplexed is a team that is a little bit further ahead?
It really depends on what kind of pull Complexity is doing to make up that trash percentage, right? I think it's all going to be about that. Because if Complexity doesn't do like one additional pull somehow, like if they manage to do a bigger pull than Perplexed somewhere, and can get extra percentage through that. So if the pull number is just going to be smaller from Complexity, then that's going to be, of course, an advantage for them. But if they have to do one additional pull somewhere else, basically use the same amount of time that Complexity did before, then it's going to be just incredibly even between those two. You can see Complexity, though, they have so much boss damage. That boss is just melting for them as Kultharok is going down. They are not pulling any of these adds on top because, of course, it's bolstering. But Perplexed is. They actually are not shying away from pulling these Shackled Souls. Of course, they can't finish them off before the boss, but they're just efficiently cleaving them here. This is really dangerous, because if any of those are dying, then Kultharok is bolstered, and that's going to be a disaster.
But
and they are dropping dangerously low.
But this is a Sub-Rogue Paradise. This allows you to get a lot more single target damage just by adding in these Shackled Souls. But now it comes down to, what, like you were talking about a second ago, where's Complexity going to be able to make up that count? This pull right here that Complexity is doing, no Ashen Hollow available to them. They're going to just have to be able to deal with all of this trash, normally with other smaller cooldowns. Windwalker CDs, Frostmage CDs are very powerful against this kind of stuff. These Butchers and these Sludge Spears need to make sure that they get interrupted as often as possible. And it looks like Complexity, they get that Pat that's on that bridge, and they pull off that pull so perfectly. That was insane by Complexity to be able to deal with that. Just excellent. It looked so good from them.
Yeah, that was really clean by Complexity, and that's really what they needed, as they're falling further and further behind in percentage because Perplexed is just getting some extra trash here and there. If that means that Complexity has to pull an extra mini-boss, possibly, in that Xaf wing, then that could cost them a lot of time. We'll see what Perplexity is going to be skipping for that extra trash that they were doing. Also, Perplexed skipping that bridge pack. Very interesting. That is a pack that Complexity pulled. So that's exactly what Perplexed was skipping, and I'm not sure if that was worth it at all, because that extra pack, Complexity just dealt with it right there with that other pull, And Perplexed didn't. So they didn't. Complexity is just ahead now at this point because Perplexed is skipping this bridge patrol.
But Complexity is not out of the woods yet. This pull that they are doing with this gas bag and all of this trash is starting to get bolstered up a little bit. That Sludge Spear is getting big. Ooh, a blind coming out right as that Withering Discharge is going to cast. Nice touch of death from Complexity here. And this is something that we saw from this team yesterday. They are leaving those mobs CC'd in the doorway. They're going to let them come in just a little bit later, and they're going to make sure that they don't cleave them too much onto Gore Chop because of bolstering. However, they are going to utilize them to get great AoE or single target to AoE conversion, and so this is going to be super good from Complexity. Perplexed on the left side of the screen, like you were talking about, just a little bit further behind. Complexity is firmly in the lead now, Nagura.
Definitely. I am very confused on why Perplexed was not doing pulling that bridge pack.
Yeah.
It really of course it's a difficult pull, but Complexity managing to do that without Ashen just means that it's totally doable, right? Especially for a team like Perplexed, they should be able to do that pull. So very interesting that they choose to not do that and do 2 other pulls in that previous wing, which really cost them some time. So very interesting. Complexity, though, as you said, firmly in the lead now as they're dealing with Gore Chop. They also have that Butcher and that Horror on top of the boss. They need to make sure they're not killing it. Scott actually getting hit by a chain. Should be able to survive. I think there's lay on hands being used by JB, making sure Scott stays alive. And yeah, they just need to make sure that the Butcher and the Horror doesn't die here. That's why they also let the shield go through from the Horror, I believe, because they don't want to bolster that boss.
It is getting very close. I think that Butcher ended up dying. I think Gore Chop may have 1 stack of bolstering fired up, sitting in that pod there. This is not looking too good for Complexity. However, Gore Chop was low enough. They do get the boss dealt with and that Diseased Horror killed off. Now they're 20% ahead on the boss, ahead of where Perplexed is, and now Complexity going to be making their way into the Zav wing. Ooh, Perplexed also has 50% HP on that Diseased Horror that they have to deal with.
Ooh,
and Swag gets hit by the chain. Is he gonna die?
He looks to be fine, but yeah, definitely some mistakes by both the teams. Fired Up also triggering that pot tender, so he doesn't have that available anymore. But Complexity, they're pretty far ahead. They also have saved the Ashen for this pull, while Ryzen has committed it for Gore Chop. So Complexity going to be doing that pull quite a bit quicker as well. You can see they have that trash pack pulled with also the mini boss. So they're going to have to do some even damage here, making sure nothing is getting bolstered. And the trash percentage is pretty even at this point. Perplex just has like 1% more trash, which could basically be no difference at all. So at this point, Complexity definitely in the lead. They both 100% clean runs, 0 deaths on both sides, so really well done.
Yeah, and JB did something really smart on the side of Complexity. He started casting his Ashen Hollow, realized that he is potentially in range to engage Sagadon if he drops his Ashen Hollow there, takes 4 yards, steps 4 yards to the left, is like, all right, here's the spot. And then he drops his Ashen Hollow. And so now Complexity here is setting up CC on this patrolling captain pack while they're also dealing with this mini-boss. It's really standard to grab these conscripts plus these arbalists into this mini-boss, but you do want to DPS down the mini-boss just a little bit just because of bolstering, because otherwise it can become a potential issue if not dealt with cleanly. However, Complexity has done this dungeon so many times. They are very well prepared on this pack, and Perplexed doing something kind of similar. They have their champion engaged, and they're going to be setting up that pack. Oh, what happened?
Yeah, so Fired Up just going down on that pack, immediately releasing because that pot tender was not available anymore, right? So just going down there while they were dealing with with those arbalists. The arbalist doing so much damage with that bleed. Not sure exactly what he died to, but he died incredibly quick. So I wonder if he maybe got hit by something that maybe he shouldn't have gotten hit by. Either way, they did manage to get him back. So that's going to be a 5 seconds penalty though. And even though they are pretty firmly in the lead at this point, if Perplexed somehow gets extra damage, especially because you have the Prot Warrior for the Spell Reflect in the last boss, right? Then that 5 seconds might actually cost them. So we'll see what happens as Complexity can skip that last mini boss, and they're gonna CC that captain that they have CC'd in the corner, and then they're gonna deal with Xav and gonna deal with the champion as soon as Xav is down, basically waiting for that RP to spawn the last boss.
So the advantages of the Vengeance Demon Hunter is definitely the Sigil of Silence. Being able to do that massive pull that was in that Gore Chop wing was something that we didn't see Perplexed do. Complexity made it look super clean. That's off the back of the Vengeance Demon Hunter utility. They made that look really good. The alternative is that Prot Warrior, like you were talking about. Spell Reflect on the last boss is definitely something that we're going to have to be watching out for. Perplexed may be able to make up a lot of boss damage just by dealing with that. And also something that we're going to have to be watching out for is, are these teams going to be able to beat the second set of this duel on Zav? Complexity already has the boss sub 50% HP. Their players are back from that initial duel. Ooh, they're just passively cleaving down this banner. I really think that this is good from the side of Complexity. A lot of teams are going to leave these banners alive for extended periods of time outside of just passive cleave from either Windwalker, Monks, or Rogues. But since you do have that Frost Mage from Complexity, that banner just gets dealt with almost instantly.
Yeah, definitely. All eyes on Complexity now. See if they can skip that next arena throw, basically. That banner coming out. You see the captain being seated in the corner, and they're just trying to push the boss here. Down to 9, 6%, 5%. Okay, it's actually incredibly close. Looks like they are making it. And now they're going to be cleaving down that captain as well. While Xeth is still not that. One of their... Probably the healer, yeah. JB is moving on, making sure he goes up to the last boss, triggering that event, while the rest of the team is finishing off that captain. Now, Perplexed, on the other hand, doing something very similar. This is so close between them. I would say it's more of a 5 seconds difference in favor of Complexity.
Yeah.
But you have the Proud Warrior, so they might be able to make up a little bit of time on the last boss. We'll see. This is going to be really close.
And Perplex sends swag. And so instead of DPSing down this Ancient Captain, Perplex sending swag, he has a lot more mobility and a lot easier time to be able to activate that Mordretha RP, because that's what these teams are going to be waiting on. You see Complexity here. They're sitting here waiting for Mordretha to already spawn. And so it wasn't about damage on that Captain. And by sending that Windwalker...
I mean, look at the damage difference.
Yeah.
It's the Paladin did 4k and the Windwalker did 4.4, so it's not even that big of a difference.
Exactly. But Complexity already has Mordretha engaged. Perplex has to sit there and wait for that RP. Both of these teams at 95% enemy forces count.
Wow.
They are going to be able to grab some of that trash that's off to the side, but it could become a bolstering issue if you're not careful. But it's just going to be a damage burn right here.
This is going to be so incredibly close. That boss really doesn't have a lot of HP on a plus 20 fortified, especially with all of those cooldowns. Bloodlust already being used for Complexity. Perplexed holding on to it. They're probably waiting for some of the cooldowns to come back up, but they can't wait much longer because Complexity is bursting down the boss. JB also holding on to that Ash, and there we go. Now it's being popped. That boss is going to be melting in just a second for Complexity. They are also pulling that trash into that Ashen now as well. They have to be careful to not cleave down the boss, the trash before the boss, but it looks like Complexity, keep in mind 5 seconds on penalty on that death that they have, but it's probably not going to be enough. Perplexed though now popping their cooldowns as well. Now they have to finish off the trash too. Alright, 5 seconds from here. I don't think it's going to be enough for Perplexed. So this one is going to be Complexity winning, and wow, what a fast Theater of Pain. 17-13. Wow, incredible.
It really is, and even after watching the very beginning of the instance and how quickly Perplexed was destroying that first boss, Complexity was sticking with it and was doing an excellent job to be able to go through it, taking game number 1 here, Dratnos.
Yeah, just a really, really fast route from Complexity. I love the way that they figured out their pulls. It just looked better than what Perplexed were up to, right? The strategy, which mobs they were pulling at which time, in addition to how well they were executed. I think both teams did a pretty good job for the most part of that. We saw some similar missteps on the Gore Chop area, right, with the cheat deaths being used. Basically, everybody in the key on both teams that had a cheat death used it on that fight, which obviously you're not hoping that would happen. Did end up biting Fired Up eventually with that death too, but it just didn't end up mattering. Even with that death, Complexity here 13 seconds faster. If that death hadn't happened, we're probably looking at 30 seconds or 25 in favor of Complexity. That is a huge advantage to be able to gain over a team like Perplexed just from clean pulls and good routing. I mean, it's rare to be able to do that.
That's right. We've already seen, a number of times the past Theater's been that very heavy experimenting ground for different routing, but what do you think it was specifically, Dratnos, that was giving Complexity that extra edge?
Yeah, so I want to start by shouting out one big thing that worked really well for Perplexed in the first pull of the dungeon, which is this weapon that Swag is using, Jotungeir, that turns you into this Valkyr. Huge amounts of secondary stats on cooldown when you press that button. You can actually swap off of it afterwards as well, so you just use it for the first pull, and then you can swap off of it to 2 one-handers for the rest of the dungeon. Look at the bolstering management they were able to make happen on some of these pulls as well. Look at the way this Portal Guardian pull dies here for Perplexed. I mean, just beautiful execution of that with high damage as well, not stopping damage. Very different from this pull, where actually the spear ends up not gripping those Bone Magi a second time. Not sure why it didn't do that. Maybe there's a cap on how many times it can or something. I know there are some effects like that, but that ends up meaning those mobs end up being out of the AoE. Really slow bolster kill there, ends up costing them some time. This is where you see Fired Up dying as a result of the earlier pod tender having been used. Really rough spot here, high pressure on the group. None of it ends up being enough, though, as when Perplexed gets to this last boss, Complexity have already got it very low. And even though their damage was ramping up towards the end there, even though they had that 5 extra seconds of death differential, even though they have Spell Reflect on this boss and Complexity doesn't, it is just not anywhere close to enough. Complexity, take that one. Wow, great performance from 2 really world-class teams. This could be a grand finals, but instead it is our first elimination match.
Instead it's a 7th and 8th place qualification match or elimination match on that one, unfortunately. But yes, they have been putting on a great show, and next up we are going to be setting our sights on Mists here in Nagura, which we've been seeing quite a bit of this weekend.
Yeah, Mist is definitely one of the more interesting dungeons when it comes to routing, because Mist, of course, with that maze, it's actually not a set maze. So basically, they don't know which maze they're going to be getting when they go into the dungeon, but both of the teams are going to be getting the same one. So what that means when those MDI teams are practicing for this dungeon, that means they actually have to practice a bunch of different routes, because the maze could be different. So that requires a lot of practice time, a lot of also improvisation, making sure they know exactly what to do depending on what maze they're getting. And we've seen some incredible times in Mist before, and we've also seen very different comps from the teams as well. We've seen some full physical comps, we've seen some Venthyr Moonking comps, so we'll see what Perplexed and Complexity are running here.
That's right. And, you never know what everybody's going to be able to work with, in particular for a dungeon like this, titles, because we have seen, on display in our first series of the day, we were looking at that exact difference between the Moonkin versus that full physical damage comp, and it really makes a massive difference when you're in the maze in particular.
Yeah, that maze is absolutely pivotal for a lot of these teams. Also, Mistcaller skipping the guessing game. Like, being able to skip that guessing game with whatever composition you're running can save somewhere in the range of like 15 seconds per guessing game skipped, which, hey, that is a lot of time that these teams can make up. It's all going to come down to preparation and practice that has been put into Mists of TIRNA SCITHE. And it's so interesting that every single team has a different answer for like what their first pull is going to look like in the dungeon, because we've even seen teams pull the Villager, and I don't think I've seen anybody pull the Villager this whole season.
That's right. It was almost like at the beginning of Season 2, everyone was just like, all right, let's all agree never to pull the Villagers ever again.
Bad mob.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That even just like, oh, well, I guess some people are still able to do it at the highest echelon of MDI, right? Just very ridiculous to be able to think about. But yeah, we've seen time and time again where teams are looking at finding all the different ways to be able to break a dungeon like this. And I feel like this dungeon in particular, this season, Dranos, has been the most like old school of dungeons. If you think about it in the way of challenge modes from back in the day, this is the dungeon that everyone's looking to break, looking to find any little holes or gaps that they're going to be able to use to their advantage.
Yeah, and it's one of these dungeons where, with the exception of that maze, the number of pulls that are being done is just shrinking so rapidly. You have to do a pull before the first boss to engage the first boss, so most teams do one. Then you have to do the maze, obviously, but teams have that cut down from the 6 or 7 maze rooms to like 3 pulls where they're pulling a bunch of stuff over the walls. And then the last pull of the dungeon, oftentimes it's, all right, let's do 0 to 1 pulls, and then let's take the rest of the count we need and put it all on the last boss. And that is just a crazy amount of risk, but with a crazy reward at the end as well in terms of time, if you can make it work out.
That's right. We're seeing a number of times where some of the extra debuffs that players have to face up against, some of the extra mobs, and absolutely massive amount of the defenders and frontals and AoEs just makes it a nightmare for a lot of melee players in particular. So that survivability, that live lord potential, a lot of these DPS makes an incredible difference. So let's see what we've got going on in game number 2 as Complexity is up 1 as Mist of TIRNA SCITHE gets going.
Oh, all right. So both teams actually deciding to go with that full physical damage comp. So no Moonkins on either side, no Rasta Druids either. That is a comp that Complexity like to run in the group stage. In the group stage, they were running that Kyrian Rasta Druid for Mists, but they're going away from that Rasta Druid. They also haven't been running it in the Theater of Pain either. Looks like they're done with it, maybe. They're like, okay, this Rasta Druid, maybe just not working out. Let's just go back to that vent there, Holy Paladin, see what we can do. As both Perplexed and Complexity are doing this Arcalyph pull with Trash, with 2 Trash groups actually, and Wolf Disco going down for Perplexed. That is so bad for them. Actually, they're not even committing the Ashen. This is very interesting. The Ashen not being committed by Ryzen here.
Yeah, and you see a Shine off to the side trying to get Wolf Disco rezzed back up, but he lost all of his CDs. You see that True Shot is on cooldown. We saw him drop his Kyrian ability. That Resonating Arrow got dropped a little bit earlier, and that's so bad for Perplexed. I was about to commend them because I really liked how they opened up the gate already to be able to allow people to eat those mushrooms, to be able to get to full HP, but this is gonna be a full wipe! No, this is so bad for Perplexed.
This is actually horrible. This is probably why all of the other teams that we have seen so far doing this pull, they have all committed the Ashen Hollow for this. And the thing is, Ryzen actually just popped it as soon as they wiped. Look at Ryzen. He had not used it, but while they were wiping, so Ryzen was probably thinking, you know what, I'm gonna pop the Ashen to recover, and then they had a wipe anyway. And now it's going to be a disaster for Perplexed as they're trying to go much, much slower here, pulling those shades, but they're not even surviving death as they just keep dying over and over. This is a disaster for them. And yeah, not committing that cooldown there, really just making the difference for Complexity. Complexity having that cooldown on JB being used, having a much easier time dealing with that Trash. And now they're on their way to that first boss already. They're going to be engaging that boss. They don't have the Ashen, but they have the Bloodlust, and they have all other cooldowns from the other damage dealers, so they should be able to make the damage check here as long as they get Ingra a little bit lower. You can see most of the damage being focused on Ingra. They need to get her to around 80% before they push the Droman to be able to make that push.
And Perplexed is somewhere in the range of like 3 to 4 minutes, even potentially behind here. They have to be able to retool, and like from here on out, this is not in their hands anymore. This is all eyes are on Complexity. All eyes are on that right side of your screen. Complexity could even have a medium mistake. They could have a decent amount of deaths. They may potentially be able to have like 1 full wipe and be able to recover. But right now, we're watching them. They're DPSing down Droman. They have Ingram Malik already at 86%. This is actually really important that they start their damage onto Ingram Malik, since they're running a composition that doesn't have a high amount of boss damage, that Hunter and that Windwalker Monk aren't necessarily known for like having great boss damage. They start the boss off by hitting Ingram Malik, then they push Droman into that 20%, and then now Ingram Malik is in that vulnerability window where it takes 100% bonus damage for 50 seconds, or 15 seconds. And Complexity here is probably going to be able to get this boss killed off in 1 phase. They may be able to even get it dead while still in that vulnerability window. The HP that you're looking for is about that, 15%. Do they do another Droman phase? Or are they going to be able to kill Ingram Malik off from 17%?
Nah, they're going to be able to kill it off. It is 45, so they should be able to do that. But still, definitely taking quite a long time here for this boss for Complexity. We've seen other teams do this a lot quicker. Of course, the teams with the Moonkins, but then also teams that had that same physical comp, that the boss a bit quicker. But it doesn't matter at this point, of course, because they're so far ahead. The thing with Complexity, right? At this point, they just have to go... I mean, they can't go incredibly slow, right? Otherwise, Perplexed might be able to catch up. But if there's any sort of like risky pulls that they're doing where they don't have like a 90% success chance, I would say they should not do it, right? Because at this point, this is an elimination game. If they win this miss, they're gonna be staying in a tournament where Perplexed is gonna be eliminated. So Complexity probably should be going as slow as they possibly can while still keeping that lead, that pretty insane lead that they have. Not only is there a 55 seconds death penalty on Perplexed side, but they're not even on that boss yet.
They still have these 2 bow breakers to be able to deal with before they can even activate the boss. Like, this is a dungeon that whenever you're practicing before the MDI, if you have a run like this, you immediately zone out. You're like, all right, that was kind of unlucky. We go again. But Perplexed on the main stage, you can't. You're not allowed to zone out. You're not allowed to start over. Unfortunately, their consistency on the first pull, they just had one of the casts go off from Incinerator Arcaleth, and now it's set them back somewhere in the magnitude of 5 minutes. And Complexity on the right side of your screen, dealing with Executioner Varuth pretty well. They deal with that double trash pack, utilizing that Hunter to be able to get all of that trash grouped up. I'm Fired Up Eagle, abandoning his namesake, playing Hunter. We'll remember this later, but Complexity looking pretty good here. I wonder what they're going to pull into this trash pack. Maybe Fired Up is going to grab something with that Hunter pet, but it looks like they're just they're continuing to just DPS this pack solo right now.
Yeah, so it really looks like they are going a little bit slower, which, to be honest, they can, right? Of course,
Yeah.
they have the liberty to go a bit slower. They can't go too slow to make sure that Perplexed are able to catch up, but they can just not do some of these crazy pulls that they maybe have planned to do. So really good on them. Yeah, I mean it's a huge difference. We're gonna see it in a second. Once Perplexed finishes off the boss, then we will see the boss split, and we will see just how much time they have lost. But yeah, it's gonna be up to like 4 or 5 minutes at this point, maybe even more. So huge disadvantage here for Perplexed, and it's such an unusual thing to happen to Perplexed as well, right?
Yeah.
Perplexed, usually they're known for their consistency, for just being so good, for having these amazing routes and struts, and seeing them not do so well in this global final is heartbreaking, especially since they also have practiced so much as well for this, right? Very, very unfortunate chain of events here for Perplexity, but Perplexed, sorry.
Perplexity?
Perplexity, though.
Stratos?
The one thing, though, is that Perplexity, no matter what happens, is going to win, right? So that's a good thing.
This does check out.
Yeah,
For Complexity,
yeah.
they're running a triple volcanic plume, which is something that we see pretty commonly done in Mythic Dungeon International. It allows you to be able to interrupt a lot of the frontals from these defenders. It allows you to avoid a bunch of these bucking rampages. And so that triple volcanic plume in here, it just makes your mobs and your pack grouped up so incredibly well. If you're looking for something that you can adapt your live key routes to, this is definitely something in Mythic Dungeon International. If you have all 3 of your DPS select that volcanic plume trait from Executioner Varuth, that's going to save you a decent amount of time in the maze, just because it allows your melee and potentially your Holy Paladin to be able to stand in and DPS more, because you're getting interrupts on all of these abilities. Look at this, as every mob is just getting bounced into the air.
Yeah, definitely a standard strategy from these MDI teams, and it's helping out so much as well, because it's also safer for the tank too, because whenever those mobs are getting knocked in the air, the tank is having like a breather, and you can even start kiting if you feel like. So really, really nice safety, and also nice for damage as well. So now Complexity is finishing off that pool, and they're going to be moving on. It looks like they're already on their way to Mistcaller. Yeah, there's a full screen. 52% trash already done for Complexity. We have seen a lot of teams pull extra trash on top of this boss. So that's probably something we're going to be seeing in a second by Complexity. That can be one of those dangerous points, especially since JB does not have Ashen available. We've seen a lot of teams that pull trash into this. They actually got hit by bombs. They're going to die.
No.
Okay, the cheat death is procced by Lip. Shakib did go down, of course, because there's no cheat death. And JB, thankfully, JB had bubble available there. He had to bubble out of that stun to not die there. Otherwise, both JB and Shakib would have died. That would have been horrible, because they only had 1 Belrus available. But yeah, thankfully they did manage to recover here, and they still have to pull this trash if they want to. They have to, right? They're 52% trash. They're gonna have to pull something on top of this boss.
Yeah, that was a very unfortunate situation all three of their melee were just sitting there looking at one another like, wait, who hit the fox? It's just like they're pointing fingers at one another. It's fine. Honestly, we have the battle res available to lose. Perplexed is somewhere in the range of 4 minutes fully behind Complexity. That was the difference in the first boss split. And so Complexity definitely does have a lot of time to be able to play with here. JB, running away from this fox. Get away. Shoot. All right. It's fine. I wonder if they're going to pull the trash into it, or if it's one of those situations where they're like, oh, we are very far ahead. We could do 1 or 2 additional pulls at the end of the dungeon and play something that's a little bit safer as opposed to having to kind of panic pull some trash at the end of the dungeon, or at the end of this boss, because it is very dangerous to be grabbing a lot of that trash on the boss, and we've seen teams commit large CDs to it. JB does have the Ashen Hollow available in 10 seconds, so that could be something that they're looking to do, though.
Yeah, they might have just been waiting for that cooldown to come back up before they're pulling some trash. We probably also not going to see a
there it is.
guessing game skip. Yeah, there we go. So Fired Up did go over there, use the turtle to get that extra trash in. The Ashen going to be committed by JB in just a second, plus those wings as well, and those volcanic plumes helping them out to interrupt those casts, especially the frontals. Frontals going off here can be incredibly dangerous, so having those plumes to help interrupt them is really crucial. You can see they did not manage to finish off the boss before the guessing game came out, so they're gonna have to deal with the guessing game one more time while this trash is still up. Oh, this spell didn't go through, so Fire Up is going down. They didn't purge the debuff on one of those mobs, so they were all rooted while this frontal is going out. They do have a battle rest available, but they're still in this guessing game. There's going to be so much AoE damage coming out in just a second if they don't finish this off, but they use a Touch of Death to be able to recover here, and it looks like they're not going to get up fired up. They're just trying to finish off Mist Color here, and also that trash that is still up. And
yes.
I mean, they have to definitely get themselves, to play a bit cleaner at this point, because Perplexed, they are on their heels, even though there is still a huge death differential with the penalty, right? But Perplexed, yeah,
Wait.
we know that they're really good, so if they're doing some insane pulls, they could theoretically still catch up if Complexity makes some more mistakes.
I'm confused. Did they kill off those defenders, or did they despawn because Mistcaller died?
I think they despawned. Yes.
Did they miscount on those two mobs? Oh no. I mean, okay. So
I think they actually did, yes.
They're still in a position where they are fine, but that right there is something that can potentially be very, very costly in a different situation. Complexity still firmly in the lead here. They are grabbing the Staghorn, and you do see Fired Up off to the side, getting these Acid Gullets in this other pack grouped up. We've seen teams do, this is a very standard pull, even on live keys. This is a very standard pull from a lot of teams. I think that they probably plan to do a triple under normal circumstances, but I think this is probably one of those situations where they know they're pretty far ahead. They're like, all right, let's just play a little bit more conservatively, and they're doing a double here with the
Shakib.
with the Reavers in. Ooh, Shakib ends up dying on the side of Complexity.
I mean,
which is,
how firmly are they in the lead at this point? If they're pulling slow and they're making mistakes, Fired Up going down too. At this point, they have it's 4 deaths versus 11 deaths, and Perplexed, they're the same trash percentage at this point. They're gonna get even more from this boss, and Complexity somehow has to make up this trash that they missed on the boss before. That means they're gonna have to do some pulls that are not very efficient. So at this point, this might actually be closer than we think even. Fired Up still not having there's no more battle rests available. They're gonna have to finish up this trash without Fired Up, and they're gonna have to do a normal rest afterwards. And yeah, they just keep losing time everywhere. This is not good for Complexity. They really have to keep up. And JB dropping so low from that bursting stack as well, having to use Bubble at the very end.
that is probably one of the worst case scenarios for them. All right, they are going to be able to res Fired Up and retool. They only have I'm laughing. They only have 1 to 2 more pulls remaining in this dungeon. The spirits are high, clearly with Fired Up. Still just joking. I'm glad that their attitude is still super positive. Oh, okay, so they do a double pull here. Yes, they know that they're really firmly in the lead.
Yeah.
They're well aware, I think.
Yeah, they're definitely aware that they're pretty far in the lead. Definitely have to be a bit careful from here on out, though. as it's getting closer and
Yes.
closer. Complexity does need more trash still after this pull. So they have the Bloodlust available, and the Ashen as well from GB. So I would assume that they're just gonna go and do the boss pretty real quick right after this to make sure they can commit those cooldowns and then get the trash afterwards. We'll see how they handle that. We've seen some teams pull trash on top of the boss, but that is something that Complexity doesn't have to risk if they don't feel like it. Perplexed still dealing with Mistcaller, of course, so they're still pretty far behind, on top of the extra time from the deaths that they have as well.
If you told me before the weekend started, oh yeah, so Complexity is gonna 2-0 Perplexed, I would be sitting there thinking that would have happened in the upper bracket and been like, huh, okay, so that's really interesting that Complexity was able to upset Echo. I would not have anticipated it was going to be in the lower bracket. But Complexity here, solidly in the lead. They have Tradova and then just a couple of trash pulls remaining from between them and being able to 2-0 Perplexed. Perplexed has just dealt with Mistcaller, but this feels almost like it's too little too late.
Yeah, definitely. It's just the thing with making mistakes in MDI is always like you can make a mistake and only lose 5 seconds or 10 seconds, and then you can make a mistake and lose 5 minutes, which is
Yes.
basically what happened to Perplexed
Yes.
there, which is very unfortunate for them, right? So even though Complexity, I would even say that Complexity maybe even made more mistakes as a whole, but all of the mistakes they made cost them much, much less than those 5 minutes, right? But they also have those 4 deaths on the board. They did not get that trash from Mistcaller. And of course, it might have something to do with them playing safer. And sometimes playing safer is not actually safer because you have practiced those difficult pulls. And if you're not doing them, then all of your cooldowns are not aligned anymore. You have different kinds of things available on different points of the dungeon. So even though it looks safer to go a bit slower, maybe that's what caused Complexity to have those small mistakes.
Sure.
So I don't even want to say that was a bad thing, but they just deviated from their route probably because they knew they were so far ahead, and that's probably something that caused issues for them. But yeah, at this point, Tradova is dropping lower and lower and lower for Complexity. They have to do this 10% trash after the boss is done, and then they're gonna be winning against Perplexed. So all eyes on Complexity, see if they can finish up this boss cleanly and get that extra trash done.
All right, and so now Tradova, 5% HP. They probably need, I think, 2 packs of trash. 10% in this area is actually a pretty considerable amount. They're probably going to be able to double up. They do have access to things like the True Shot. Shakib also does have some CDs, so they have some offensive cooldowns that are available here if they do want to double that pack up with the Acid Gullets that are back in the corner. However, okay, so Fired Up is just tagging those Reavers in, grabbing some birds, and now all CDs are being dropped. All eyes on Complexity as they need 10% enemy forces left, and then they will be able to take this down 2-0. I think it's just going to be this one remaining trash pack that's going to be able to give them that 10%.
I think so as well. They did pull that Reaver pack on top as well, so should be able to get that 100%. And you can see just how fast that trash is dropping. Keep an eye on the percentage. 2 more Reavers left, and that should be it. 2% that they need. Yeah, there we go. All right, so it is going to be Complexity winning against Perplexed here.
Not
and
bad.
Perplexed, unfortunately, going to be eliminated from the global finals.
Absolutely insane. Perplexed getting eliminated in the bottom of the bracket. Complexity going to be moving on here as neither of the misruns are really super clean, but like you said, Nagura, if you just make one mistake early on in this dungeon, it could just cost you the entire series as a result. And Complexity ready